You are live. Have a great meeting.
Good evening, good afternoon, good late afternoon to everybody on this beautiful fall afternoon, first day of October. Today is Thursday, October the 1st. It is 2020. We are set for our 4:30 meeting, and I am now about to do roll call. This is the roll call for the Joint Task Force Vance Monument Task Force between the City of Asheville and Buncombe County. And I welcome all of our task force members and the staff of the city and the county and anyone who might be listening in as we learn about the project ahead and begin to figure out the kind of way we can move forward on this. So if folks will unmute your mic, a few names before I get to you as I go down the alphabetical list, and let us know if you are present. I'm going to start with Catherine Calhoun Cutshall.
Here.
Dennis Fagnant.
Here.
Lawrence Gilliam.
Here.
Savannah Gibson. Savannah Gibson. Elizabeth Harper.
Here.
Essie Hutchinson.
Here.
David King. David King. Bernard Oliphant.
Here.
Andrea Olson.
Here.
Carmen Ramos Kennedy.
Present.
Ben Scales.
Here.
Orlean Simmons. Orlean Simmons.
Here.
Shirley W. Whitesides.
Here.
Welcome, everybody, and I will now turn it over to Ms. Simmons for the approval of the minutes.
Good evening, everyone. You have received copies of your minutes, and I now ask for corrections or additions to the minutes.
Ms. Simmons, I have one small correction. In section two, item D, my name is misspelled, my last name.
Thank you so very much. I think that the corrected spelling for it is under the members list. Is that correct?
That's right.
Thank you so much for that correction. Any other corrections or additions to the minutes? Hearing none, I'd like to have a vote, a motion, please.
This is Bernard. I move that the minutes be accepted with necessary corrections.
Thank you. Now here a second.
Lawrence Gilliam, second.
Thank you. It has been moved and properly second that we accept the minutes as corrected. We're now ready for the vote. Please answer by saying yay or nay. Co-Chair Deborah Miles.
Yay.
Catherine Calhoun Cutshall.
Yay.
Dennis Fagnant.
Yay.
Savannah is absent, is that correct? Lawrence Gilliam. Lawrence Gilliam. I'll come back. Elizabeth. Lawrence, are you with us?
That was me and traffic in the background. I was unmuting.
Elizabeth Harper.
Yay.
Essie Hutchinson.
Yeah. Yeah.
Carmen Ramos Kennedy.
Yay.
Bernard Oliphant.
Yay.
Ben Scales.
Yay.
Shirley Whiteside.
Yay.
The motion carries, and thank you very much for voting. The next item on our agenda is for the review the action items and announcements, and those are by Cortina Caldwell.
Thank you all. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, task force, co-chairs, and those tuning in to join us. My name is Cortina. I'll be facilitating us through the rest of the agenda for today. So as Co-Chair Simmons said, I want to go ahead and take this time to have us review our action items and announcements. You will notice that we have more time for this section. We want to go through some review on community engagement plans, also review research and proposals that have been added, and have commentary from the task force. And then there was also a request to make time in the meetings for review of public comment as well, because those have been coming in pretty large volume, and just having time for you all to discuss. Following that, we are going to move right into our community education panel, and I'll speak more about that when we get there. I will ask task force members and co-chairs once again, just being mindful as things come up. And review next step, we also do the same to prepare us for our next meeting. So that being said, I want to start with the community engagement. So task force members, you all were sent out a couple of proposed dates based on the conversation the co-chairs and the staff work group and I had on Friday. At that time, we had determined that it would be good to go ahead and move into our virtual town halls. If you're wanting to follow along with me, I'll be referencing our timeline and our community engagement plan simultaneously. As we're in October 1st, we are moving into our full month of community engagement phase. At this point, we have the community engagement plan in place, as well as have added a few additional organizations. And it's the list is looking great at this point, and continue to send those additions my way as you have them. We did have a conversation, thank you Liz for that. So there is a couple of things that I want to touch on as far as the community engagement and the town halls. In reaching out to our colleagues at the city community engagement team, we recognize that folks were out on vacation all this week, and we hope that we can engage Dowa Hitch and Brenda Mills to support this process. There was a model that was created during the Reimagining Public Safety process that allowed for people to be mindful of regulations around COVID, but also still be engaged in the community and for opportunities as well. So what we hope is that with your consent and permission, that we can adjust those dates for the town hall from what I just sent you out on Friday, that we might have those on October 22nd and 29th, so that would give us time to prepare logistics, as well as to get the word out to community members, to send out the announcements to those that we've added to the community engagement list, and to make sure that people feel like they had adequate notice. We recognize that the 8th and the 15th is a pretty tight turnaround, and we definitely want to make sure that we have proper preparation for that. We do have the support of the community engagement teams and the staff group to move forward with that. So with that being said, I just kind of want to open it up as far as those suggested dates to see if there is consensus for that, if there are any concerns with that. And maybe before I do, I will also acknowledge per the timeline, excuse me, we have plans to have our your draft recommendations prepared by October 22nd. That in mind, if we were to have these community engagement dates or the town halls on the 22nd and 29th, my recommendation is going to be that we have a review of the community engagement plan and the logistics for town hall meetings, as well as reviewing public comments and any other public input for the next meeting, because that is community engagement, is doing that preparation work, seeing what people have said, and making sure that we're in touch with the people that we want to be hearing from in the community. And then on the 15th, so by that meeting, having an outline of that draft recommendation. So at least understanding what are those different sections or points, or what does that recommendation document look like. So going ahead and start outlining that, so that as we're hearing from people in the community come the 22nd and 29th, that it's going in and plugging in that content and that information that we're hearing from people in the community. So with that, I want to open it up to the task force to get your consensus on if that plan sounds okay for you and how we'll move forward with community engagement, or if you have any questions or concerns about that. Yes, and if you're all good with it, you can go ahead. We'll use the thermometer for ease. You can just give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions sideways, and then thumbs down is that you're dissenting. Thank you all. Okay, so I see we have consensus there with no dissent or disagreement. Okay, so we'll move forward with that plan. I'll be following up with Brenda Mills and Dollar Hitch, as well as our staff group as soon as tomorrow, so that we can go ahead and get that plan in place. Just a couple more things that I want to say about community engagement before we move on to research and proposals is that we do have the plan or the idea that we talked about last Friday to have physical input boxes. And so this would allow us to reach those people who might have technological barriers, internet barriers to coming online and submitting their comments. Those could stay at the locations that we identify, that you all identify, that we identify, until the term of the task force, or until that final moment when you all want to collect that information and add it into your recommendations or review it for your recommendations. What we're thinking about as far as that goes is to have those physical boxes at the HACA or the Housing Authority, community neighborhoods, parks and rec centers, senior centers, potentially have those at churches or fellowship halls, mini Jones, public libraries, AD Tech, and other potential campuses, locations that there might be high foot traffic for the Black and Indigenous communities that we want to make sure are included. So that being said, are there any questions, comments, or additions to that plan for us to have those physical input boxes? Does that sound like a good plan for us to move forward with that to you all? Okay, great. And if you have any additional locations to add to that, please reach out to me. And we'll talk more about that next week, but I'll just say that for now. Alrighty, so at this time, I want to go ahead and invite Andrea to share. I know there was a proposal that you had, and I can present my screen whenever you are ready for that. I'll turn it over to you, and then following that, we can have any other discussion on proposals, and then we'll move into research.
Thank you, Cortina.
Thank you.
My husband's working out outside, so I told him to turn the music down just for a few minutes.
Okay.
So I just one of the reasons I wanted to join the task force and something I could offer is the ability to kind of collect and distill and simplify massive amounts of opinion and information. It's one of the things I do in my work every day, and I took a whirl at it and read almost all of the public comments over the last few weeks. And I found it really interesting that there's an amazing amount of kindness and sensitivity to all races and equality. That the majority, and I don't have an exact number, are saying that they don't want it taken down, but they had almost the majority also said, let's cover up the words and rededicate it and repurpose it. A lot of people were also being really sensitive to the tax dollars we are stewarding. We are stewards of their tax money. So I saw a lot of comments to that effect. And the desire for the Vance Monument, the obelisk, to be an educational center where we learn about people and history and things that have gone wrong and good in our town. And so that's kind of the consensus that I've gotten so far. Obviously, that's not all of them. And so I drew up a proposal that combines this, things I've heard over the weeks from Carmen, Bernard, Mr. Bacote, Shirley, Lawrence, even before this meeting started tonight. And I've come up with something that I feel like is pretty budget friendly, inclusive, and honors all the things that we've been discussing and that the task force takes very seriously, in addition to the public comments. And this is sort of my first stab at at it, and obviously just a proposal. And I think Cartina is going to try to share it. And we also uploaded it to the proposals. So I took an existing photo of the Vance Monument, and as she is, do you have it, or do you want me to try to send it? Okay. I talk fast sometimes, sorry.
Sorry,
It's
okay. I couldn't unmute and let you know I am presenting, so you
are,
see it in
okay.
a second. It's loading up right now.
Great. So as a little preview, so something that Shirley had mentioned was relief, that art style of relief where we have a sculptural technique where the elements are on the background and then something comes off of it. So there is that option, or a full color. And these aren't the colors that I would propose on the panels. But if you scroll down to the bottom, I put a directional compass on there as well. And it's not in order of importance by race, which is why that front, that little red spot in the front, that's actually I did a better revision that I uploaded as well. But the little red square in the front is that existing monument. You guys, the little rock one that's in the front that talks about Vance. Instead, we could replace that with, you can't read that there, but an explanation of the 4 directions, honoring the people of Asheville. We all belong here. Various people have helped to build this city, and let's honor them. Over in the obelisk, you'll see panels on each of the 4 sides, which face the different 4 directions. That is the medicine wheel that Bernard and I have brought up a few times. So the East is always where a ritual in Native American practice starts. The East is where the sun rises, and that represents yellow Latino Asians who have contributed to building this land. With that, we haven't talked a lot about that at all, and I don't really know any names, but the idea is just either a relief sculpture on each of the 4 where it says Vance right now, covering up his name and putting panels on all 4 sides that cover the south will be for the court-facing side is south direction, Cherokee, the land stolen, the lives destroyed here, and that they were the first people of this land, and even those paths that Deborah mentioned where they crossed here. And the west is always representative of the Black, and that's the museum side, honoring that the spirits of the slaves who were sold here, the people who were wrongfully treated in our town over so many years that we heard about last week as well, and who have built Asheville. And then the north side is typically the winter, and there's all the symbology with it, but that's the Caucasian. And one of the public comments mentions Vanderbilt and how much he did to help start the YMI. And I found that comment, I don't know if you guys read that one, but it was pretty interesting. I came across an article written by a young African-American doctoral student who was researching his great-grandfather, a freed slave who came to Asheville back in the 1890s. Turns out his great-grandfather worked for George Vanderbilt and partnered with him on race relations and the formation of the YMI. I think we should pay homage to George Vanderbilt and the Black business leaders of Asheville who paved the way for positive race relations, and for George Vanderbilt's generosity in his contributions to the YMI. Who knew? I always thought George Vanderbilt was a racist who used Black slaves to build his mansion. Turns out that wasn't true. So that's from Carolyn, one of the public comments. So I just, kind of took from how can we make it so that in 100 years, all of the children who walk by this monument feel like they're represented and honored, and that we remember the history and pray for those souls who have been so suffering in our town. So those directions, those panels wouldn't be yellow, red, black, and white. They would be a pictorial representation honoring people of that race who helped to build what we call Asheville. And one of the commenters said, why don't you replace Vance and say, we the people of Asheville? And I thought that was kind of cute. But just as a sort of a starting proposal, I had a brainstorm. I wanted to throw that out there, that it is possible to use the existing panels that say Vance to combine a medicine wheel kind of idea and honor all people and the people who've built our town in a very inclusive way, which is what Asheville means to a lot of people in the comments. They're like, I came here because it's inclusive. And I don't want to take up too much time. So that's my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for that, Andrea. So I'm going to drop the link here in the chat box for the task force members so you can have a closer look at it. I apologize for any delays with the technology. I do want to open it up at this time to task force members to see if there are any comments or discussion that you'd like to offer to what Andrea has presented.
Shirley Whitesides. I like the idea, and I know we have to think about budget, but if we had lights so you can sit at night, if people are walking around, you have a lot of people in town. Midnight look like it's daytime, and I still think lights that represent different cultures to make it exciting so it be joyful and to get away the evil spirits.
Thank you, Ms. Shirley. I see, Andrea, you're going to respond, and then Catherine is up.
Oh, I was just going to say that's a wonderful idea. And one of the challenges is there is a fence around it. So the ability to read it or just using art to represent the people or having the letters really big would be important as well.
This is Catherine Cutchall. Ms. Whitesides, I think that the lights are a really great idea. And I put several documents in our research folders. One of them is just a history of the monument itself or the space that the monument occupies. And one of the things that I think is really interesting is that in the 20s, the monument had like strings of lights on all sides that sort of shaped it up like a Christmas tree, like we do now around Christmas time, but much wider. So if you go look at some of those pictures, you'll see these really beautiful sort of strings of lights that come off of the monument and onto the buildings that give that, like you said, sort of joyful look about it. I think that those images, there's a postcard in that timeline that I put in that folder, but it shows a scene of Asheville at night at around 1915, 1920, and it's just gorgeous. It's really, really beautiful. So the lights, I think, are a wonderful idea.
Thank you for that, Catherine. And I'm seeing a couple folks off mute. If you're not speaking, if you will stay muted, and also that's kind of a flag to me that you might be trying to speak. So that's just helpful facilitation wise. Bernard, were you up next?
I don't know if it was next, but I'd like to reiterate, compliment, and salute both Andrea and Shirley for brilliant ideas and brilliant proposals for adjusting or reiterating or refocusing the attention of the structure. But I don't like the idea of cover up. If Vance's name is on the monument, with the comments I've received from many people, all elements of Vance should be removed or taken away from the structure if we're recreating a new image. Just my thoughts.
Thank you. And that was Bernard Oliphant. Were you going to say something in response, Andrea? I thought I saw you.
Yeah, somebody mentioned filling in with more concrete to flatten the surface. And again, a lot of the people were concerned about the cost and the time and all of that, but I do hear you, Bernard. I saw a lot of comments about that as well. I think that there could be a middle ground for that, especially the amount of our skill. There was another comment about the skill, and one of their relatives had built that and how beautiful that art just as an obelisk. And we could mention about the qualities of an obelisk. That would be something to navigate. Somebody else mentioned a crowbar, just pull off those parts, and that's also a possibility.
Yeah, thank you for that. Any other comments or thoughts about proposals? Essie, did I see you raise your hand? I couldn't tell. Okay, thank you. Any other comments about proposals or research at this time? And maybe the last 5 minutes or so of this section, we can focus in on public comments. So any other thoughts about proposals, research? It sounds like what you submitted, Andrea, there will be, so I will be sending out that image that I just presented, as well as your updated one, just so that it's kind of clear, even maybe what those changes are that you made in between drafts. And write email the task force tomorrow that people can review that further. And with that, I want to open it up for any comments, any discussion about public comments, or any trends or anything that you want to make of note to the task force at this time.
Cortina, this is Catherine. Just very quickly, I just wanted to let folks know that I had added several documents to our research folders. One of them was the one I just referred to, which is a sort of a timeline and a look at the space where the obelisk is today. And like I said, it's got some photos in there through the years you can sort of see. And I tried to get from different directions and that sort of thing. Interestingly enough, we don't have any views in the 80s, just a strange note. And then there's another one that's very short because I didn't think I needed to get too much into it. Just a couple of links if it wasn't clear already, Vance's views on race. And then the other one that's pretty large, and I tried to go way back in time on, is a resource of Indigenous sources. And that sort of includes links to several or explanations about several dig sites here in Buncombe County and just over the border in Haywood County, to give a little perspective on ancient Indigenous peoples. Sorry, I just had some traffic, but this kind of gets into the idea of paths and who was living on this land and what their culture was like. Most of these dig sites that I kind of point to are pre-Cherokee. So it's, again, really ancient stuff. And there's another pamphlet in there that I think we should all take a look at. It's called The Indian Path in Buncombe County. It is really more about southwestern Buncombe County and the area around Hominy Creek, where there were Rutherford expedition campsites in the former town of Swannanoa, which was destroyed by the Rutherford expedition. So just take a look at that. I think it's worth everyone looking at. It's probably 15 or 20 pages, and it's all digitized through UNC Asheville's archives. So those things are up there, and they're worth taking a look at.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for all of your work in uploading that. I'll be sure to send out another link and those attachments for the ones that you specifically highlighted in tomorrow's email as well. All right. Thank you. Yeah. Any comments or any discussion around public comments, any trends or things that you all feel that hasn't come up in the meetings thus far or needs to be addressed? I see your hand, Deb.
Yep. I think in general, most of the people who are commenting in the public comment are white people. And I think we need to keep a bigger, a wider scope of what we're going to get through some of the public engagement. I think we need to reach out to folks in the African-American community and let them know that they can comment. I don't know.
I see your hand, Essie.
A few sites. What's the other thing? Oh, the most serious one is for me is the letter from the NC 26th Regiment, and I think there are probably legal implications in there, and I think we need to talk about it at the meeting with the attorneys tomorrow at 2 with the staff. The repairing of the monument was not a unanimous decision by the community. It was did not engage the community as to whether that should happen. This has been their work for the last 50 years or the last 40 years anyway. But I do think we have to address it very seriously. I was very concerned and disapproved that the Jewish community was used as a justification for why it should be kept the way it is as a Jewish person. And I will say that when all the fundraising was going on and all the decisions were being made about it, there was a considerable part of the Jewish community that was very much opposed to how this came about. I just want that publicly stated, and is still very concerned about what this is in the middle of our town. And just one other thing, I had a friend who survived, escaped from Leipzig, Germany as a young woman and watched what happened to her family and her community. And she said that when she came to, and she was a kid, she couldn't go to the Leipzig Zoo, she couldn't sit in the park, no Jews allowed signs all over the place. And the first time she moved to Asheville and she went up to Pack Square and saw the segregated bathrooms and water fountain, she just, like, what country have I come to? And am I next? So I just wanted to throw that out there in my concern about the letter from the NC 26th.
Thank you. And just everybody remember to state your name for the record when you come on. I don't think you did.
Yep, this is Deborah Miles.
Okay, thank you so much. Essie, I see you next, and then Mr. Bernard, and then we'll close out this section.
Hi, this is Essie Hutchinson. I just wanted to comment on what you said, Deborah, and that I totally agree with everything you said about the public comments. Like, as when that was brought up, I was thinking, like, who are the people commenting? Because I think that there's like a certain group that usually comments on tasks. And I think that's really important to see who is commenting, because I don't think that their comments do matter, but I do need more comments and kind of being forceful, because I feel like a lot of people's opinions that we actually do need aren't being heard at all. And I really think that we need to speak to artists around Asheville and who have made sculptures around here. I think that's very important, because Asheville is so artsy and like crafty. So it's important to like speak to people that have made art around here, that have done this before. So I really think that somehow should happen. I don't know how, but yeah.
Thank you so much, Essie. Mr. Bernard?
Again, I agree with both comments, and I'd like to add the emphasis on remembrance of the faith communities and the different faiths that are involved. So far, we've focused a lot on ethnic groups, but we have to remember that there are just as many faith groups in the community that have contributed, and we also need to ensure that they are not overlooked in our development.
I know you're cutting it out. This is Andrea Olson, but Bernard, since you're a serviceman as well, I also noticed a lot of comments mentioned service people of the area.
Thank you all for those. And I think that hopefully what we'll see moving forward is that the community engagement plan, especially for this month, that there can be some special attention paid to those that we're not hearing from, whether it is through those physical input forms, if there's any barriers to people feeling comfortable submitting things online, and then also making sure that the faith communities are engaged, as well as those who have served. And Essie also brought in the comment of hearing from artists, and so hearing from those communities as well. So noted. And with that, I want to go ahead and move us into our community education panel for today. I'm going to just share my screen briefly, just in case any of our panelists are not able to be seen. Perfect. There we go. All right, so for today's community education panel, we'll be focusing in on untold histories of the indigenous and enslaved in Asheville, Buncombe. We will go in the order that you see on your agenda, hearing first from Dr. Joseph Fox, who is a member of the Buncombe County Remembrance Project, also connected to and a member of the leadership team with the MLK Junior Association of Asheville and Buncombe County, as well as many other roles that he can share more about. He'll be speaking specifically to us today about the studies that have taken place around enslavement and lynching around the area that we know today as Pack Square Park and Vance Monument, as well as some more of that untold history. We also have Juanita Wilson here, who is affiliated with and also in leadership with the Eastern Band of the Cherokee Indians, and is program director at Western Carolina University, and has also worked closely with Community and Foundation of Western North Carolina. And Ms. Wilson will be sharing with us about the untold history of the indigenous, specifically hearing about some of those pathways that knows before, and noting the Cherokee history that as far back as we can document was some 10,000 years ago. And last but not least, we have Drew Reisinger, who is a member of the director team. I hope I'm getting that right. And you can share more specifically about all of your work with the Buncombe County Register of Deeds, and has been a historian in his own right. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I want to go ahead and turn it over first to Dr. Joseph Fox to share with us. You're welcome to share your camera, or if it's easier, you can definitely just make sure you're unmuted, and I'll go ahead and start your time. And Dr. Fox, I'm not sure if you're talking. It looks like you're off mute, but we can't hear anything if you're talking. Can you hear us? Okay. So Dr. Fox, if you can hear us, maybe we can try having you log off and log back on, because we're not getting any audio. And Juanita, Ms. Wilson, would you feel comfortable going up as we get Dr. Fox connected? We'll just adjust a little bit there to make sure that we can hear him. And if you want to unmute, I think you're still muted as well. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. I'll go ahead and start your time. And Dr. Fox, I see that you joined. We'll have Ms. Wilson go ahead and start to make sure that we can hear you. And then we'll have you go up second. All right, Ms. Wilson, I'll turn it over to you.
Shio Nagata, hello everyone. Wayanita Wilnishi Dogwadoa, Juanita Wilson. My name is Juanita Wilson, and as you noted, I'm a member of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, but I'm also a member of the Navajo Nation. So my understanding, as you noted, was that I needed to talk about the Cherokee history in terms of the lands we inhabited, benefited by being part of. I guess I want to start with, when you talk about indigenous pathways around the Cherokee people, it's a really long and complicated story. And the reason I say that is because our story goes way beyond Asheville and even the surrounding areas. The original Cherokee territories covered what is now northern Georgia, eastern Tennessee, western North Carolina, and South Carolina. So that was our territories way back when. So I'll go ahead, and I wanted just to note that in how much land we have actually lost over the course of many decades and beyond that. So the oldest paths and trails in our area, in the areas that became North Carolina, were made by animals. And they were in search of food, water, and salt, because that's what they need in order to retain the water and be healthy. So it's like the smaller species of buffalo, elk, those kinds of animals. Just we sort of took advantage of them breaking through the bushes and making those pathways, and we took advantage of it, and we used it for the same reason. As time went along and our agriculture evolved, it became even more important that we start having access to more areas. And so trade came along when the Europeans approached the New World. So eventually the paths that the animals created were traveled by Indian ambassadors, by war parties, couriers, bringing trade back and forth, families and even whole communities traveling to visit with each other. And I know I saw a really, really old picture of a really big group of Cherokees who walked from where we're at now in Cherokee, North Carolina, to Haywood County and Waynesville just to vote. And so they were gathered on top of the hill, waiting to, for it to be time for them to go and cast their vote. We don't even drive the vote anymore. So it's kind of interesting to hear how we love to walk and we love to run. So thank you for allowing me to share that introduction. So I want to talk real briefly about what's the history in and around Asheville. I got to say that this little assignment that I've been given to learn more about the lands we once roamed freely, there's a lot of really cool information and a lot of surprises for me. So I appreciate you guys really putting me in a position to learn more about my people. And as I'm listening to you all talk, it's fascinating. And the work that you do is incredible. So kudos to you guys for bearing your souls, venturing in uncharted territory. It's made me do the same. So thank you so much for your dedication. I really am amazed and humbled by being part of your, just being involved with your group's activities. So when we think about Asheville, we think about a lot of different things, like the French Broad River, the Biltmore Estates, Swananoa River. There's a lot of things we think about. Our beloved Patton Avenue and all those areas. And we know that Vance Monument sits right in the middle of Pack Square, which is, I think Patton goes through there. But if you just envision today that the paddlers that are floating around the bend of the French Broad, okay, and they do that a lot, and especially now because with COVID, we're trying to find ways to get out and have fun and have some release. Actually, my Cherokee ancestors raced dugout canoes in that very river, and they used poplar trees in order, and they prepared them. So they were doing those races not in the plastic or rubber or polyurethane vessels that they use today. We use trees. It's all about sustainability and using what was natural. So also, when you think about the runners, it's all about sustainability. The runners who are participate in various 5K races at Carrier Park, perhaps my ancestors in their buckskin outfits instead of the running clothes that you have today, we're also having the races. We were really well known for running really across the state to events, to gather, to visit with family or friends. So we would run all the way to the East Coast and visit or do trade or sell. So long before there was an Asheville, here at the confluence of the French Broad and Swananoa rivers, we coined the phrase "where they race," and in my language, it's "unto kiestiyi," which means "where they race." And all this area was known for that kind of travel in terms of the Cherokee people. One of my friends uncovered a guidebook to Buncombe County, and this goes back to 1922. There's a brief mention of an Indian landmark that was visible in 1791, so going way, way back. And that was around the time Buncombe County was founded. So it notes that the oldest graves in Asheville were the Indian graves on Patton Avenue. And this is immediately west of Lexington Avenue. And that's somewhere, I think, between the Public Square and the Battery Park Hill. And does that sound familiar to you guys in the area? And you don't think about it when you drive through those, that there are Cherokee graves there. And I didn't know that either. So, is it being honored? Is it even known? In all these brochures we put out there, in history, is it noted? Because often you're building something, or you're doing a project, or you're breaking ground, and all of a sudden you see a pottery shard, or you see parts of a human remains, and that's really the only time you really think about it. There might be somebody's dead relative there, but it doesn't seem to have the same honor as it does for some groups, and that's what really got me. So the other thing I kind of wanted to mention, we talked about George Vanderbilt and started Biltmore Estate. And long before he put that 250-room chateau together, and I think that was around the late 1880s, something like that, the river bottoms of that whole area had already been home to indigenous people for the past 10,000 years before that was even put together. So I got that information just perusing through what the Citizen Times was reporting on. So I was really amazed to know that we were a real presence in there. And so I wanted to wrap up by just sharing you guys my thoughts on the monument. I think that what you're doing is beautiful. I love the idea of putting information on the obelisk that talks about local people, indigenous people, people who sacrificed just to make a living here and to find a home and to find some sense of well-being for their families and themselves. Their history needs to be known. Their stories need to be told. So I really love the suggestions that I've heard, and I fully support that. So, but what I don't want us to get caught up in just to say that I have not done the deep dive like you guys have. I'm sharing with you with what I know today, and my mind may change, but I don't want us to put all of our energy into a monument, because truth be told, history's there. Sometimes it's buried, but it's never going to go away, regardless if there's a monument here or there. What I'd really like to see is policy change, and I think that's where our energy needs to be. Symbols will always be there for whatever they are, and you can rework them, and that's great. But I would love for some real systemic changes happen, and just thinking about Cherokees weren't able to vote even around the time the African Americans got the vote, the women got the vote. We still weren't recognized as citizens of the United States. So to me, that kind of thing is, and there was a census done too. I noted that in 1790, there was a census done in Buncombe County area, including Asheville, what is Asheville now, but the Cherokees wasn't included in it. They were purposefully not included in that census, so we just didn't exist. And it's so I don't want to get too emotional about it, because I think that my feeling is for all of the indigenous peoples. It's for all of the marginalized peoples. We're having to fight just to be recognized as human beings. So this movement that's happening across this country, let's not worry so much about what people are calling us, because for me, that doesn't matter for me. The work has to continue. We've got a major movement going on, and we have got to tap into all that energy. And I'm hoping that it will become a positive thing, but it's not. They're not going to go down easy. It's not the institute that's there with white Americans for the most part. I'm married to a non-native, so there are both sides of the story. But even for him, it's hard to let go of the history of the Confederacy or things like that. It's really difficult for them, and I think we have to kind of be sensitive to the ones who income-wise are marginalized. He didn't grow up with money and power, but he's still a white man, Scotch-Irish, and you can't hardly get much more white than him, and he'll tell you that. But he married me, and he loves me, and it didn't matter that I was a Native American. And it's my hope and prayer that one day, for our kids and our grandkids, we will finally come to that way of being. And I thank you guys so much. I'm willing to answer any questions. I'm willing to participate in anything in the future. And I love the idea of learning more. So thank you for forcing me into that pathway, and I'm going to continue on it.
I just want to give our virtual applause for Ms. Wilson. Thank you so much for your time. So we do have some time here. We have a few minutes if there are any questions for Ms. Wilson about anything shared or questions you have about the Indigenous history or future also, because that was named.
Ms. Wilson,
will you state your name for
yes, Deborah Miles. I've seen that spelling of what Asheville used to be called the place of the races. Would you say it in Cherokee for us again?
Yes. Okay. Undo kia sti yi.
Thank you.
Kia, Sti, Yi. It's really difficult to say, the language because so if you spell it in phonetics, it would be UN, and I would put a dash, TO or DO, because that's do, Undo, Kia, KIA, dash, SDIYI. So Sti, Yi. And I, it sounds like an E in phonetics. So if you got me recorded, maybe Undo, Kia, Sti, Yi.
Thank you. And Ms. Wilson, would you be willing to share what that looks like written with me, and I can share that with the task force after? You don't have to share it now. I can send it out.
I will. I'm happy to do that. I'm a first language learner, or second language learner. So I try to take every opportunity to speak as I can. It's an experience, and it's a shame because of being marginalized. You don't know a lot about your history. You don't know a lot about your culture, your language, and as you guys know, we experienced boarding schools where we couldn't do any of those things. It was punishment or humiliation. So we're trying to catch back up. And in fact, I'm creating a program around 7 of what they call Cherokee core values. And we're creating curriculum for all the Eastern Band workforce. And I just got the approval from the principal chief for his office and tribal council to go through that training too. So we're all going to learn about how our ancestors used to make decisions, how they used to treat each other. They took care of each other. Those values will be taught in terms of today. So for instance, group harmony, which is one of the 7, it would be team building or collaboration, right? So we're trying to blend ancestral knowledge with today's way of looking at the world, and it's a big challenge, but I'm loving it because I'm learning so much about who we are and what we need to bring here into the present in order to be balanced again.
Wow, thank you so much. Mr. Bernard, I saw you with a question or comment.
Ms. Wilson, we want to thank you for what you have brought to us. And I'll quote a great comedian named Wilson. No, I won't even quote his name. But one of the thoughts that he had many, many years ago was, you never know what it is to be the Indian until you've been the black man too. And I say that to say this, that if we're able to develop our medicine or educational will as an indigenous group, that you are one of the groups that will be represented in that will. And maybe you can bring the language that we can copy parts of that language into our will, so that, as Ms. Whitesides would say, as you go around the educational wheel, it becomes a pivot point that leads you to other key areas within the city. So we can use it as a pivot point for discovery and learning. And we can follow that far beyond the Chickasaw, the Natal, the Cherokee, and all the other indigenous folks beyond the ones we've already talked about into that educational wheel.
Let me also share a very exciting piece of this Cherokee Values curriculum. The way I want it to, we're the guinea pigs, we're the pilots. Okay, I'm using my own people as guinea pigs. But what I'm hoping to create, and this is part of my project work in competition for a fellowship that I'm applying for. The kit will be flexible enough to where any indigenous tribe or peoples can adapt their culture into it. It's like you're taking the components of it and you feed your own cultural knowledge into it. And it teaches you how to develop curriculum that you can revitalize the culture that your ancestors brought along. And as for us people who are indigenous, regardless of the country we came from, the part of the world we came from, we're still here. We're still fighting for this. And people are recognizing that. And even if you aren't from a quote unquote indigenous peoples, you still have a love for humanity. And that's what it's important. We just have nice little roadmaps that we can demonstrate culturally. So that's my hope and dream, is that we can start revitalizing for all Indigenous peoples, and that, we can start working for the future of our kids and grandkids, because for me, that's what I'm working for. I want them to know their language and history and culture and not have to research it like me. They'll know it. Thank you, Bernard.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wilson, once again, for your time, for your insights, for your contributions. And at this time, I want to go ahead and welcome on our next presenter, Dr. Joseph Fox. I think we got your audio is working now. We can't see you, but we can at least hear you. So we'll take it how we can. And I want to go ahead and turn it over to you, and I'll begin your time. Oh, I thought we had sound back, Dr. Fox. It looks like we're still not able to hear you for some reason. Is your volume up on your computer? I wonder if that could be what's happening. Okay. So why don't I will connect with you offline, Dr. Fox, to see if we can figure out what challenges there are with the tech. And would you, if you're willing to do that, and then perhaps we'll have Drew Reisinger go ahead and share. And Dr. Fox, I'll connect with you to see if we can get your tech sorted out. We'd love to hear from you today. Yes, and I'm going to share the call-in information with you so we can just do it that way. All right, and Drew, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you then, and I'll go ahead and start your time. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. Just, can you guys hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can. Good. Hey, is video working? Can you give me a thumbs up if that's working? All right. I can't see myself, but you can see me, so that's good. Roughly a decade ago, Deborah, Miles, and I partnered on a project which put Buncombe County on the map for being the first county in the country to digitize and compile our records of slavery. I know many of y'all have heard that, so I don't want to get too far into the weeds of that today. People like Orlean Simmons and Carmen and others who have been helpful in that effort. So for many years, our county courthouse stood in the center of what is now Pack Square, where the Vance Monument now stands today. It was in this location that enslaved people were sold for many years on the courthouse steps. As my friend Catherine and Zoe Ryan have pointed out, this was not the only place that slaves were sold, but oftentimes they had been sold on these county steps. So it does have a symbolic purpose that I think is worth recognizing. When an enslaved person was sold in Buncombe County, there was a bill of sale that a purchase would have been recorded with all the other property records in the Register of Deeds office, which was inside the courthouse at the time. The slave owner would have paid the county a fee to put this document in the public record. If you guys want to see what some of these records look like, if you go to buncombecounty.org/slave deeds, I can throw up a link later in the chat as well. But all of these records are public, and I encourage you to look through them. They're an incredible, there's an incredible database there. But prior to the Civil War, Asheville's tourism industry was in large part propped up by slave labor. Most of our service industry workers at the time, the people who were actually keeping the hotels running, were enslaved people. It's, I think, important for a government official to say this right now, but Buncombe County government not only upheld the institutions of slavery, but we also profited from it. And that was a lot of what I wanted to get across to you today. But I do want to tell you a story of an experience I had that I think is pretty important to the conversation y'all are having today. A couple of years ago, there was a woman who called my office. Her name was Shada Vance. She was calling from Washington, D.C. She was calling because she found her ancestor, Hutzel Vance, in our records online. She asked if I could help her determine if her ancestors were slaves. I'd never been asked that question before, and I was taken back by it. And it was it's a jarring question to be asked. And I felt like there was this there was something important for me to try and help her figure out. She'd already done a lot of research, but together we were able to help her unpack more of her ancestor Hutzel's story. So when I joined her search, we found that he had been married twice. And on that next marriage record, we found his parents' names were Richard and Aggie. Those names sounded familiar to me. I've read them before, and I told her I would help her keep digging to find out more about who her ancestors were. I remembered them because I found them in the will of Priscilla Vance, which gave a detailed account of what should happen to her slaves upon the death of Priscilla. Hutzel and Aggie were listed in the will of Priscilla Vance. This confirmed for us that Shada's ancestors were in fact enslaved in Buncombe County, not just by any family, but Hutzel was owned by the family of Governor Zebulon Baird Vance. Once we confirmed that Shada's descendants were owned by such a prominent family, a whole new world of research was opened up to us. Between the slave records in my office and marriage records and death records and birth records, we were able to use those records with the information that the Vance birthplace had and that the docents there had found, and we traced the life of Hutzel Vance, which isn't that easy to do for most enslaved people. Each of these documents together helps us paint a fuller picture of who this person was. Shada and her father, Anthony, decided they would come to Asheville to see what the place their ancestors toiled looked like. We met for lunch, and Anthony told me a story about his family lore about who Hutzel was. The oral tradition always said that he was a very large man of almost mythical proportions, close to 7 feet tall. It is told that the large structure and his dark skin must have made someone in town feel threatened. Hutzel had fathered children with a white woman, which also put him further at risk. The story goes that in 1909, someone had found him to be so intimidating that they burned down his home on Christmas Eve and they killed him. We found his obituary published in the Asheville Citizen, which had backed up the oral history of this family, which had been told for generations. It was inspiring to go on this scavenger hunt with Shada and be able to find evidence that had been told by her grandfather and her grandfather's father. But there's something that really struck me with Shada and her story is that her last name is still Vance. And I think it's important that we stop and we think about Shada Vance. We don't know when Shada's descendants were brought to America. And we don't know what her true name was prior to slavery. We know that at the end of slavery that her ancestor Hutzel gained his freedom and took on the last name of his owners, as shown by the records that we have. But I think it's important that we think about our own last names and the heritage or nationality that it's derived from and what that means to you. Shada's name is forever connected to the fact that her ancestors were enslaved. Shada's story is incredible, and it's why I wanted to share it with you today, and I think it's pertinent for your committee. There are African Americans all across the state of North Carolina and in Buncombe County whose names reflect the owners of their enslaved family members. We see that in Shada's story, and that goes for many of the names that we see around town from Merriman to Patton and Woodfin. These monuments continue to remind us and glorify some of the darkest days of our nation and our community. In addition to the slave records that my office keeps, we also recorded cohabitation records, which is another fascinating record set that I think is worth mentioning to you. So enslaved individuals weren't legally allowed to marry in the state of North Carolina. It was against the law to marry. But after the Civil War, they were required by punishment, so they had to do it. But it essentially gives this incredible record set. They had to come to the courthouse and say who they were cohabitating with. Essentially, it gave them marital rights. So we have an incredible set of records called cohabitation records, which is kind of a backhanded way to say enslaved marriage records. But it provides an incredible list of those who survived slavery. In more recent history, we also have records of racially restrictive covenants that took place in many Asheville neighborhoods. These covenants stipulated that African Americans could not buy a home in certain neighborhoods. These were binding until being struck down by the Supreme Court. And by the time that the covenants were abolished, the damage was already done. These racially discriminatory documents blocked many from home ownership. When this is coupled with federally backed redlining and urban renewal, we know that it essentially stripped African Americans of generational wealth they will never get back by the means of having home ownership. The reason I wanted to mention these things to you today is to show you how deeply woven these issues are into the fabric of our government and society. This isn't just about a monument. This is about institutional racism that continues to exist within our government, and we have to acknowledge and correct that. And that's kind of what I wanted. I felt like that was what my office keeps, and I think it's important that I shared it with you today. And I'm open to questions if there's anything you guys want to go over.
Thank you, Drew. So we'll go ahead and just open it up for questions at this time. And we have about 5 minutes at least.
Shirley.
Thank you so much for all of your work and your research.
Shirley Whitesides. How did Asheville profit off of the slaves?
So very through taxes, they came in and they recorded documents. So we got a portion of those taxes, not dissimilar from the current property records in North Carolina. When you sell property, you have to pay an excise tax. So there's the very transactional value of what we took in at the time. I think there's also, if slaves were propping up the tourism economy, that was essentially how Asheville became wealthy. And I think by the taxes we then put on hotels and businesses, Asheville and Buncombe County substantially profited and became who we are because of the industry of slavery.
Thank you for that. Mr. Bernard, I see you up next. And then Catherine after Mr. Bernard, I'll have you go up.
Yes, I had promised myself that I would try to be quiet, but it's not working. And rather than me go through the catharsis of stuff bursting out inside me, I'll go ahead and say it. And I want to start out by saying what Mr. Drew emphasized that, or Mr. Reisinger emphasized that this situation is a lot bigger than just a monument. And I'll read just a thought that says, should the names of white supremacists, slaveholders, slave traders, Confederates be found in the prosecution of slavery? All of those things happen because slavery is so deep rooted into this environment that it's inseparable. Especially if you look at, we got every space, every roadside, every building, almost every structure in this entire city, to include the name Asheville, Hendersonville, are deeply rooted by slavery and Confederate ownership. You know, we got Patton Avenue, Merriman Avenue, we got the Jackson Building, we got the two city names I just mentioned, Weaverville, Weaver Park, Church Cove, Beards, even our county, Buncombe County, Woodfin, McCormick Field. All of those are named after slave or associated with slavery. So I want to make sure that we understand that our focus is this particular monument, and the city has an implied task to deal with the rest of the things that we were not chartered to do.
Thank you, Mr. Bernard. Catherine, I'll go ahead and pass the mic to you.
Thanks. This is Catherine Cutchall. Drew, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate everything that you talked about. In particular, and I don't have so much a question as I wanted to bring to the attention of the task force that when Drew spoke about covenants and real estate covenants, there was a reassessed real estate covenant on Pack Square that had specifically to do with the Pack Library, which is now the Art Museum. And one of the um, excuses, I'm going to say, that the library board in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s used to deny Black people the right to use the main public library was the fact that the building, they could lose the title of the building if they allowed Black people to use the library. And one of the most telling examples of this is a young mother who applied for a library card for her child because there were not necessarily sufficient reading materials in the Market Eagle branch library. But the library board decided that it was too risky, that they could lose the building for simply allowing a Black child in to check out books. So not only is that area around the monument the site where many, many enslaved people were sold, but it continued to be the site of segregation policies, Jim Crow policies, and even so far as to, bleed into the public library. So I just wanted to say that these covenants are a really important part of this. And they're not something that's just in the past. That particular covenant was made out in 1909 and was continued to be used all the way up until 1961 when the libraries were integrated. So thank you for bringing up covenants.
Thank you, Catherine, for bringing that forward. And once again, Drew, for bringing that information as well. Do we have any other questions or comments at this time?
Just one follow-up. So after we created the slave deed database here at Buncombe County, if people do want to see that, it is there for you. There's also now a statewide database that's being modeled after Buncombe County, which is kind of cool for Buncombe County to take the lead and then the state of North Carolina to follow suit. I think also on this front of your task force, I think y'all are taking a lead in discussing some challenging topics, and I'm honored to join you, and I appreciate you having me today.
Thank you. Thank you once again, Drew.
Thank you for your work.
I did go ahead and share that. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I had typed in the link exactly as you said it, and we got a corrected link in the chat box for where to find those slave deeds that you had brought up. And then I also will be following up with you, or Deb might follow up with you to get those historical accounts that you mentioned, and we can add those to our research folder for the task force. Thank you so much. And I believe so hopefully third time is the charm. Dr. Fox, are you here? You're here via phone. You're able to unmute yourself at this time so that we can hear you. I think it's not wanting to work today. So maybe what we'll do, I know Dr. Fox has been attempting to join us, and what we figured out was that there was a firewall issue, and so it doesn't seem like we're gonna get to connect with him here via this call. I wonder, and not to put you on the spot, Co-Chair Simmons, but I wonder if there's anything that you might want to share, knowing that you're a part of that work, and then we can also follow up with Dr. Fox after the meeting to get the presentation or information he was going to share.
If you'll give me just a couple of minutes to pick up his notes, I will attempt to do that.
Okay. So we have a yes. So what we will do then in the interim, if there's any comments or next steps from the task force that may have come up in what we've heard from the panelists so far, or the panelists from the last two sessions, just so that we're capturing any things that we need to add or look into further as we move along.
Katina?
Yes, sir.
This is Bernard. And I was laughing to myself as we were waiting for Dr. Fox. And I said, because my system...
Uh-oh. I think you're frozen, Mr. Bernard.
Can you hear me? Am I back now?
Yes. Yes, you are here, Dr. Fox.
Okay, because it kicked me off my cell phone too. So it had been on Teams before, so I'm not sure what it is about your particular version of this software because I used it before. I use Zoom most of the time, but so I'm going to talk fast in case I get kicked off again. Is that okay?
That sounds great. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. So the Remembrance Project, our goals are to not just focus in on those folks that were lynched in Buncombe County, but we have expanded those goals around to more accurately reflect the history of racial and economic injustice and inequality throughout Buncombe County. And so we're going beyond what is required by the Equal Justice Initiative to look at truth-telling around any racial violence that has occurred throughout our history. And we know that according to EJI, more than 4,400 African-American men, women, and children were hanged, burnt, or shot and beaten by white mobs. And so one of the things we want to help educate folks about is that when we talk about lynching, it is much more than just hanging, the physical hanging. It is the any mob mentality, racial violence that occurs. And so we are looking at truth-telling around personal trauma as well as community trauma. How has it affected the community? And we know that there were 3 people of record. Now we say of record that were lynched in Buncombe County because we know that there are many more acts of racial violence that were not documented or did not fit the definition under EJ.
Unfortunately, we lost Dr. Fox. It looks like got kicked off. Yeah, I hate that that's happening. Let me see. I don't think his phone number is here either. Ms. Orlean, did you have anything you wanted to share about the Buncombe County Remembrance Project? And I'll see if I can connect with Dr. Fox. But
sure. I would say that this project, okay, I was looking at the note there. Yes, we started this project through the Martin Luther King Association for Asheville and Buncombe County and met with different groups to form this particular task force. And we also have support from the city and the county and a number of stakeholders. The first thing that we did was to register with EJI as an organization that would put together all of the different work groups and carry out the work that's needed to be done. And within these groups, we came up with our project operating structure, which is the community stakeholders. It's a group of 18 plus organization groups and individuals. We have a steering committee with 17 organization and groups. To do this work, we have the following work groups. We have the communication PR work group, community engagement work group, museum tour work group, lynching research work group, logistics, historical markers, site location work group. We also have an essay contest work group. This is for high school students. We have the educational outreach work group and the compliance work group. Some of our goals are to more accurately reflect history of racial and economic justice. And I think this was what Dr. Fox was speaking of when we lost him. Also with Foster Healing.
And I'm back if you want me to take over.
There you go.
We will tag team.
Please do.
So keep your
I hope
notes
I didn't
handy.
fail you.
You didn't. Orlando and I just did this presentation to Asheville.
Oh, no.
You're back on, Arlene.
It's like tennis.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, it's on. We can hear you.
Okay, he was saying that we just did this presentation for our Leadership Asheville, and the same thing happened where he flicked off, and I just started reading his script until he was able to get back on. So I'm looking forward to him getting back on here shortly. But I was talking about our project goals, and one is to foster local conversations and reflections concerning community healing. The community healing through truth telling, educational programs, reconciliation events, and transforming narratives. Within our work, we have found that there are 3 documented lynchings. And that's not to say that these were the only lynchings that happened in Buncombe County. These are just the 3 that have been recorded. And we have a particular work group that's doing more research on this. We found one for a John Humphreys. This was in 7/15/1888. Hezekiah Rankin, 9/24/1891, and Bob Brackett, 8/11/1897. Now, one of these sites, we were able to trace it to a churchyard in Weaverville, and Dr. Fox and I took a trip there with someone that had done the research on it, and we actually followed the trail of the African-American man that was trying to get away from the mob. And we went through all of these little trails and everything to where they had chased him up to a tree there. And this was where the lynching took place. And so we were able to take the pictures and to document that. And we are in the process of finding out just what crime that he was accused of having committed. Hezekiah Rankin was with the railroad, and he was Carmen, did you want to chime in on that? I saw a note go up.
No, I think Carmen was just commenting just overall. Feel free to keep
okay.
I'll keep
All
it
right.
on the chat box.
She is a member of our task force. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hezekiah, the research that I found on him, that he was connected some way with the railroad, and he was accused of killing the engineer, and he was lynched by a railroad hand. And I don't know if it was done at that particular time or if they actually carried him back to the spot. And we have started tracing some of their family members that actually lived here in Asheville. One of them was with the last name of Cowing, that taught math at Stevens Lee High School. And I went to school with some of his children. So I'm trying to do some research and see if I cannot connect with them and to get more history about this particular person. But there's stories that go along with all of them, and they are continuing to unfold. Once we have completed the work within our work groups, we will be able to document all of this information and to send it back to EJI and to complete following their guidelines so that we can claim our markers and bring them back and have them installed with an appropriate ceremony. This task force will probably stay together for another year or so because there are other things that we want to continue to do following their guidelines. I hope I've made Dr. Fox proud.
I think you did a phenomenal job in the moment, so we have to give some virtual applause to her being
thank you.
there on the spot. And thank you so much for stepping in and for sharing.
Sure.
Are there any questions about that work or any comments at this time? Carmen, I'll turn the mic over to you.
You were magnificent, Miss Orlean. Oh my goodness. You absorbed it all.
Help me, Carmen. Help me, Carmen. I really appreciate the work that you're doing with us, Carmen. And we also have a newsletter. Mm-hmm. And at this time, I think we have about 200 readers, and we are very much open for other people to join us in the task force and to work with one of these work groups.
Thank you very much. And I see your hand, Deb. I'll pass the mic over to you.
So those were two, one's in Weaverville. The other one had to do with the railroad. What about the third one? Did any of them happen near Pack Square that you know of?
We have not had received that documented information as of yet, but I do understand that lynchings did take place there. Whether they were recorded with names of people, I'm just not sure. We have a particular group that is working on that, and they just found, I think, one news article about one of these where the person was lynched for having said something to a very young white woman, and they and the mob found the guy or the person that they wanted to be the guy, and the description was that he was barefooted and he was wearing this plaid shirt. So when they found this person, he had shoes on and another color shirt. So they gave him a good beating, put a plaid shirt on him, and took his shoes off and showed him to the white young woman, and she said, "Yes, this is the man." So the lynching took place. We welcome any information that anyone would like to give to us so that we can continue to explore these and then report them to EJI so that we can also get markers. And Carmen is working with the work group that's seeking the sites for these particular markers when we get them in hand. And of course, we've had some suggestions about the spot where the Vance Monument is now and around in that area. But I'm sure that we will come up with the appropriate place along with the city and the county government.
Thank you so much once again, Co-Chair Simmons, for sharing that information. Offline, I did connect with Dr. Fox, and he's willing to email me anything that he'd like to pass along, and I'll share that with you all tomorrow.
Good.
Carmen has a comment, and then I think after that we should turn it over to the co-chairs for adjournment.
I don't know whether this is necessarily appropriate right now, but bringing those markers here when we finally do get to that point is going to cost money. So we will definitely be reaching out to folks to support us in fundraising to get that job done. Just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Carmen. And I also just want to note, and I'm making a note as well, just for consideration for this task force, as far as the Buncombe County Remembrance Project being on our community engagement plan, and just thinking about how we can engage that group and those involved, and just making sure that information is translated both sides. So with that, I will pass.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I'll pass it over to our co-chairs for identification of any additional or important next steps, and our adjournment process.
Thank you. I would like to thank Cartina for her facilitation and her leadership and her planning. Do you have any?
Thank you.
Do you have any remaining action items or next steps for us at this time, or have we covered all of them?
No, ma'am. I have some written here that I will bring up in our meeting tomorrow, but just to state them for the record, there are those additional proposals to send out and share from Andrea. There's also some, documentation. I want to say action items, but some documentation to get from Drew, as well as Dr. Fox and Ms. Wilson. So I'll be working on getting that. And then to go ahead and start moving the community engagement town hall planning forward are the three important things that I have on my list.
Thank you. We'll join you tomorrow for that, the co-chairs with. If there's not any other business, I would like to call for a motion for an adjournment, please.
This is Bernard. I move that we be adjourned.
Thank you, Bernard, for that motion. Can we have a second to that motion?
Shirley Whitesides, I second the motion.
Thank you. Receive the motion. It's been properly second. We're now ready for the vote. All those in favor, please let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Co-chair Deborah Miles.
Aye.
Catherine Calhoun Cutchall.
Aye.
Dennis A. Fragment.
Aye.
Savannah Gibson.
Aye.
Lawrence Gillum.
Aye.
Elizabeth Harper.
Aye.
Essie Hutchinson.
Aye.
Carmen Ramos Kennedy.
Aye.
Bernard Oliphant.
Aye.
Andrea Olson.
Aye.
Ben Scales.
Aye.
Shirley Whiteside.
Aye.
It is unanimous. The meeting now stands adjourned. It is now 6:02 p.m. on October the 1st, 2020.